Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on fraud prevention. And special thanks to Ekata for sponsoring this webinar and the speakers for taking their time today. Now, we've entered a decade of rapid digitalization at speeds that we've never seen before. While this progress brings about a lot of conveniences, of course, it also has the unfortunate side effect of increased opportunities for fraud. In Asia Pacific alone, it is reported that 1 in 4 consumers have fallen victim to online fraud. Now, there's 5 of us here, so maybe I don't know if any of us has fallen for it, but statistically, 1 in 4 is the number that is reported, which is why this topic is close to our hearts. And today, I'm glad to be joined by Nicholas Stipp, who's on top of the screen there. He is the general manager for Ekata by Mastercard. We have Chen Chow, who's the co-founder for Fave. We have Beaver below him, who's leading the group's efforts in fraud prevention and compliance. And of course, we have Gabby at the bottom, who is the chief risk officer for RCBC. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's start with some broad trends and taking a big picture look at things. And maybe we can start with Nick, who's right on top there. What are some of the most alarming trends that you're seeing in the space of fraud that you've observed within Asia Pacific?
Yeah, thanks, and good morning to everyone here. I think what we're seeing that's most alarming is really increased, I would call it, industrialization of fraud. So, on the one hand, we have technology, and fraudsters are always trying to be ahead of us on the anti-fraud side from a technology perspective. So they're using technologies like generative AI to move faster, to try more things more quickly. It's not manually punching in numbers. It's not creating identities, piecing pieces together. It's truly creating something that looks like a real profile from pieces that they may have purchased on the dark web or combined with things that they've thought of themselves. So there's a lot of technology being leveraged, but the really alarming thing, I think, is on the human resources side. So we are all seeing lots of headlines, and we are in the heart of scam territory in Southeast Asia, in countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, in particular. They just have armies of people, and a lot of them are there against their will, that are working together with the technology to accelerate the pace of fraud attacks. So if you asked what's alarming, I think that is truly the most alarming thing that we're seeing these days.
Certainly some scary trends over there when you have all these syndicates using these sophisticated tools to launch more of this kind of attacks. Um, Moving on to Chen Chow. Chen Chow, what are some alarming trends that you're seeing in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Vincent, for having me. Great to meet with everyone. Yeah, I come from more business side, so I think that
Yes.
maybe like compared to the rest, we are all the fraud or compliance experts. I'm more from a business side, but I think that from a business perspective, right? I think that is that while we have a team that look into that, from a business perspective, is moving forward while make sure that this doesn't come in and disrupt us, right? And I think that a bunch of it, I think that what Nicholas shared just now and what Vincent shared as well, I think the synthetic identity fraud is one of the things. I think automations, AI, where today people can do it at scale, right? And I think that's going to be where going to affect a lot more. So I think from a business standpoint, every day I think sometimes when I talk to my CTO, it's like, okay, every day there are random people trying different things. It's just that how do we make sure that go beyond ahead of that, right? So I think that would be what is it. And I think a bunch of social engineering and fraud as well, where people talk to people. I think sometimes in my previous friend chat group, we're hearing friends being people trying to be scammed, and these people saw them try to scam back and all this kind of thing, right? So I think and accounted take over as well. But I think that there's multiple progressive steps. Even like Malaysia, the central bank just announced a national fraud portal by mid next year. So I think that will be one step ahead as well. But I think it's a continuous challenge. And I think all of us, irrespective of players, are friends and partners in this, because together we will hit together. If fraudsters know how to scam at one platform, they will scam at the other platforms.
I think, to your point about social engineering as well, it's no longer just the very simple and straightforward kind of phishing and social engineering, right? Like, I'm reading about cases in China where they're using deepfake videos to actually uh, conduct this kind of social engineering attacks, and even with the basic ones that I think a lot of our parents' generation struggle with, and when you add on this kind of layers of sophistication, it becomes even more scary as well. Thanks for your points, Chen Chow. Moving on to Beaver, from your vantage point, Beaver, what are some of the alarming trends that you're seeing emerging in this space? Your device is muted.
Yeah,
There we go.
actually for us in the banking sector for Singapore, we have been seeing the usual, the job scams, the e-commerce scams, your love scams, the government impersonation, and so on. I think this is something that's really brought upon during the pandemic, especially when everything goes digital, right? And we see the scammers actually moving online, and actually rightly so, right? The cost to move online is actually much cheaper, especially operating in low cost Southeast Asia region, which brings about the recent report published by the UN Human Rights Office on the online scams operations and trafficking within the region, and how set syndicated they can be. They actually have call center data centers. So the bank has been seeing all these trends coming out, but I think lately we notice another shift. I think people are getting more immune, just like COVID, right? People are getting more immune to all these calls coming in. They don't get the ROI. So what do they do now? They then evolve the technique. They come up with malwares, Android malware. So this is really one of the areas that we've been seeing emerging from our perspective, and we have been evolving our techniques to fight Android malwares, and that's why we even speak to Nicholas' company as well. Mastercard, a bit of let me do a bit of pitching for him as well. We're also trying to get some product from Mastercard to see how we can fight
Thank you.
this this latest trend of malware, banking malware that we see, and it's really scary. The entire account get taken over. The traditional controls that you have in place actually doesn't really work that well, because it can mimic that person, and there you go, empty out the account. That's from our perspective, from the bank perspective. From my bank perspective, we don't see a lot, but it is worrying enough for us to do something. Uh, and it's worrying for us as a banking industry to do something about it. I think you will see my other peer banks will be implementing some controls on their end, their platform end, to fight this upcoming trend.
Mm. I think you rightly pointed out that during COVID there's a rise in this, right? I mean, there's a lot of factors. I mean, people are lonely, so love scams become more prevalent. People are greedy, so this kind of scam, they're more vulnerable to this kind of scams and frauds as well. But also to your point, like sometimes when you plug one hole, they find the next vulnerability, the next exploit to really target the users. That's why it's kind of a constant battle to stay ahead of them, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's a bit like COVID. I always tell my guys, this like COVID. We are
New
starting to
variants, is
understand
it?
yes, we're starting to understand how COVID works. Then we implement something. Then we had to vary the vaccination. So now we are going into the next vaccination to make it like an endemic.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is a virus to society too, so it's a pretty good analogy. Thanks for that, Beaver. Moving along to Gabby. Gabby, what are some of your views on the alarming trends that you see around the region and in Philippines as well?
Thanks, Vincent. I like the analogy about the COVID and the evolving variants. Ever since we first talked about this, I believe it was 2 years ago, we talked about mobile fraud. We talked about social engineering also.
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. I like to characterize the evolution on two dimensions. Right? The evolution of fraud has come in two dimensions. The first dimension is the vector itself. So what you're seeing now is an increased sophistication in the type of attack. It's no longer just cold calling, trying to offer you this and that generic. You're now finding more educated types of phishing, more within context, more that users or victims would fall prey to, find it more credible. Um, then also there's the evolution of players from small hackers. You've gone to nation states now participate in these particular activities. But then again, there's another trend which I find really amazing is democratization of the fraud. In the deep web, you actually, if you're a hacker, you can actually get a lot of these fraud solutions off the shelf. You can actually subscribe and deploy yourself. So now it's become democratized. So that is essentially how, on the vector side dimension, fraud has evolved. The second dimension is surface area. So we see now attacks not only for individuals, but also in corporations. They now are attacking supply chains. Third, and
Oh no, I think we've lost Gabby for a moment there.
transformation brought about by, sorry,
Sorry, I think we
am
lost
I
you
back?
at supply chain. Yeah,
All
carry on.
right, yeah. Sorry. Then the next one is about digital
Uh,
transformation that the pandemic has brought about. Our clients are now more digital. They now connect to us over the World Wide Web. And that increases actually exponentially the surface area of the risk. Then there's now cloud adoption. A lot of the companies are moving towards the cloud. It has its own security concerns. Not that it's a problem, but it's something to consider in terms of the surface area. Then there's the game changer, artificial intelligence. So now you're seeing, and I think 2 weeks ago I just spoke on a forum about AI, and I told them AI is good for companies, but it's also good for bad actors because it gives them the capability to not only increase the frequency of attack, but increases the quality of their type of attack. Imagine an engine that learns from the mistakes of previous attacks and improves its hit rate, its success rate over time. And I think uh, that is actually some of the most bothering trends I'm seeing, and we need to be prepared for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby. I think AI is definitely a double-edged sword, right? Across all facets of society, we can see the benefits and also the threats that AI does bring as well. And I think that's an interesting note. So I want to also direct this question to the rest of panelists to get their view and the sense of how the rise of AI would affect and impact our combat against fraud. Maybe we'll start with Nick and then Chen back to Beaver. Nick, you have the floor.
Yeah, so we have been using machine learning models in what we do to detect fraud for years, right? And Mastercard as a company has been using them for years. Ekata uses machine learning to look at its fraud scores and learn from what our clients are seeing in their network and hone our approach. And the fraudsters are using them as well. What we're seeing is our data has been used for years in sort of rules-based fraud environments. Those are too easy for industrialized fraudsters to figure out. So what we are seeing more of is you have to have something that learns on your side, on the bank side, on the e-commerce side, in order to keep ahead of what's going on and to learn and adapt and block the fraudsters at the gate. I think the AI allows fraudsters to do is generate new types of attack that are more credible. I learned recently about, we say people are not picking up phone calls anymore. We've learned that. The governments have done enough education to stop people from doing that. Well, how about a video call from somebody on WhatsApp that really looks and sounds like the person? Maybe you will send money to your friend if it looks like. So these types of attacks are keeping us all on our toes, and we just have to fight back with technology. So you can't have AI on one side and not the other, because the AI is going to outsmart you.
I mean, it's really scary, right? I mean, how do you, I mean, for the most of us who are maybe a little bit more savvy in the internet, we may be able to tell the difference between a deep fake video and whatnot, right? And I think for the less sophisticated, it might be very hard to distinguish whether or not this is a AI-enabled phishing scam, or whether or not it's the real person that's trying to contact you. And how do we move forward, like to educate consumers about this new thing that's happening?
Well, I think we do things like this, but we need to work as a community. I mean, before we joined this call, we were all talking about, some of the folks on this call may be competitors with each other. we know that we're competitors around the industry, but we do have a common enemy. And I think working together to share solutions on this, but also to invest resources and educate the end consumers together, that can really help us bring the awareness and make people more savvy.
Certainly. And moving on to Chen Chow, are you seeing any trends or any emergence of all this kind of AI-enabled sort of frauds and scams and whatnot from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think from my vantage point from Fave, we haven't, because I think one thing is that because we don't hold money inside our account, we go with e-wallets, with all the payment gateways and everything. So at least they have nothing to really scam from a people. So good is that our chargeback rate is low, right? But I think that but of course, as you zoom out, I mean, one of my friend, he was saying that he got recently AI video, deepfake video that sounds like him. He himself was like, "Is it me?" Right? And it was automatically generated. Somehow the scammer tried to send it, and he got it right. But if that video, I'm thinking like if I go to my parents or any of that, right, other generations, there's a decent high chance that they may think that it's true, right? Because it sounds like the person and everything, right? So I think that will be one bit as we go on it. I think it's that as a platform, as all industry players, how do we get as fast? And it's not just about how good we can get to, because I think getting the industry to get there is not the toughest, but how do we educate millions of consumers out there, businesses out there, which are our clients, consumers, to be up there to prevent, right? Because this keep on evolving, right? And I think that will be one of the things that I think we'll go through. I think it will definitely be coming here. I think that it's just how do we adapt. I think and the more we educate, actually, we might actually create more potential scammers as well, because there's more people thinking that there is a potential, right? So I think that's the challenge. While we educate the consumer, there are more people thinking that money to be made there.
I think it's also scary to consider that the technology has evolved quite far, right? In the past, you probably have to gather hundreds of hours of data to be able to effectively replicate the person's face, the voice. But I'm seeing some versions out there that's able to do a fairly convincing job with just 2 minutes of video clip, right? And that's really scary how accessible this technology is to fraudsters and scammers. So, some points of consideration for the audience here today as well. Beaver, what are you observing in terms of how AI is impacting our combat against fraud, both on the supply and the demand side of it?
Actually, to be honest, even without that AI, people are falling to fake friend calls, you know, and that one got no AI. and that's really enough itself. Itself is very worrying. And the scary bit is I was watching TED Talks, and I saw this very famous guy. I think his name is Tom Graham or something like that. That does the Tom Cruise deep fake. During the TED. Do you remember that guy, right? So he did one live session, during the TED Talk, to show that even at live, he can morph an audience face and the voice to mimic one of the co-hosts, with him during the talk. And when I watched that, I told myself, we are in so much trouble. Can you imagine China replicating this in scale? The technology, they will be able to take this. Not to say China is running a scam. I'm just saying that this technology, they will be able to replicate it and resell it as a form of a tool, And it's definitely China is able to make these things very accessible for the common man. And even in the US, I think they are offering websites for you to synthesize your voice to do a recording of a passage, to do presentation. I remember coming across one of those sites that was covered on The Verge, one of the YouTube channels as well. And I think to myself, this technology is getting so within reach of simple men, laymen like myself. I can tell you the fight against crime, fraud, everything will be an uphill battle. I think in the next 4 to 5 years, we have to constantly evolve the technique. And the worrying thing, right? You can do a lot of customer education and all that. But what interesting soundbite I had from the reporter that was speaking to about crime, right? He said the people who fall for it are not the ones who don't fall for it are the ones who read the newspaper, see your social media posting, watch your video.
Mm.
The people that don't fall for it doesn't read the newspaper. They think whatever is circulating on WhatsApp is the word of
Mm.
the gospel. Whatever is circulating on Telegram is definitely true. Whatever it comes out from, some funny website, even the Onion, the thing is real news. So you really can't. You really have to figure a way to
Mm.
reach to this general
Yeah.
population, and that
Mm.
to me is really the most generic vaccination against the fight for scam that we can
Mm.
really come out to lah. And it's really to constant education. And I tell you, at one point of time, with my own children, I have a special pass key.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I will say something just to authenticate. Say, I'll tell them, if dad
Mm.
calls you up,
Mm.
and you ask me a special
Mm.
key, and the
Mm.
password doesn't gel, then it's not your
Mm.
father. Please don't pick it up. Then just put down the phone and move on. I has reached this stage with my children. So that's how
Mm.
scary, because WhatsApp call and all that keeps coming in and all that with the kids and all that. But you can't starve them away from technology, right?
Mm.
Because it has to be a part and parcel of how
Yeah.
the society goes as well. So I think it's really an uphill battle, to be honest. It's
Mm.
quite
I think
gloomy actually.
I think I think to some degree it feels almost dystopian that uh, in some ways we almost cannot trust anything that we see because of how all this technology has
You're
evolved.
right. You're right. You're right. Right. I always joke
Yeah.
about it. We are going to be like the
Yeah.
one episode of either Monty Python or the no don't know whose army. I can't remember. There was a show
Huh?
about them defending UK, and then they
Huh?
go around
Huh?
doing password, and like who goes there. Then you got to do a password nowadays. Even your friends and kids. You got to do your tats. Just showcase the tats. There's some unique tats. I think we are. I hope we are not reaching there, but it's quite scary, to be honest.
No, it's
I
true. It's
mean,
true.
there
And
was a
I hope.
demonstration. There was a live demonstration
Mm.
done by
Mm.
one chap during the financial crime seminar in Singapore.
Mm.
He actually recorded and asked AI to generate his singing voice, and he actually did it
Mm.
live. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those circulating on social media as well. It's pretty scary how accurate these things. Thanks
That's right.
for
That's right.
shedding some light on this. Gabby, do you have anything to add about how AI is impacting our fight against fraud?
Well, I agree with Nick that machine
Mm.
learning and AI have been a
Mm.
very useful tool for the good guys like us to
Mm.
combat fraud. It helps us cover a larger area. But now what's happening is that the bad guys are now taking AI, generative
Mm.
AI to be precise.
Mm.
And remember, I mentioned that I was in a talk about 2 weeks ago, just last week. Uh, in my research, I came across this thing called Fraud GPT.
Oh.
Fraud GPT is a jailbroken version of Chat GPT. And
Wow.
in Fraud GPT, it's by subscription. You can actually ask Fraud GPT to generate code to create a phishing website or create a spear phishing email convincing for a specific company. So those types of things now you can simply ask uh, the AI for, and they will give it to you. So any Tom, Dick, and Harry does not have any level of sophistication to mount an attack.
Mm.
So that's a bothering development. I think I am not seeing that yet, but I think that's something we must all prepare for.
Mm.
Um, the other thing I think that's important, and I know I've spoken about this in our last session about social engineering, to Beaver's point there about the password. It's the principle
Mm.
of multi-factor authentication. Right? Every time you get some kind of communication from your banking institution saying that this and that your account has been uh, compromised, or we are validating, we are completing our KYC, have
Mm.
your own separate method to verify that you have created independent of the source of information. If it's your bank, then always have the phone number of an official with the bank you're
Mm.
familiar with so that you can call and verify whether this
Mm.
particular communication is legitimate. Right? But always have that thought. I said, remember, think first. The longer you think about it, the better the chances that you'll detect that there's something wrong with the
Mm.
communication. So I think those are the key things And there are a lot of other down the line, over the horizon developments, such as the Internet of
Yeah.
Things, that AI is probably going to increase their attack on. Because remember, in the Internet of Things, every device is a computer, and therefore, if every device is a computer, every device can be hacked. And that, I think, is the over the horizon threat that we also have to prepare for.
Certainly true. I mean, about the fraud GBT one, I think that's the scary thing that I was not aware of, but that's often the case, right? Whatever that we use as tools, the bad actors will use it too. I mean, we have software as a service, they have cybercrime as a service, and it's just a thing that happens and something that we have to constantly fight against. I'm just curious though, and I wonder if anyone in the panel has any insights on this. Um, because we increasingly rely on biometrics more and more, especially facial biometrics for onboarding customers, right? Will we or have we reached a point where all these AI deepfakes are able to or will be able to circumvent some of these biometric measures? If anyone has any insights on that. Gabby?
I think,
Yes.
yeah, if I may, right? Biometric technology so far has a lot of safeguards that will guard against computer generated images. They have certain vector, certain parameters, if you will. But that's not saying that an artificial intelligence will eventually figure those algorithms, those parameters out. So I think, if anything, for a biometric solution provider, they need to now join the arms race. They need to step up their game. They need to keep ahead of the bad actors. This is an arms race we're in, and this is just getting accelerated speed as we go forward. So I think that's key. We need to stay ahead of everything.
Certainly. And sorry, Nick, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that. Yes, it's an arms race, and we have to continue to improve for biometric providers. But I think it's also about multiple solutions. So we like to talk about layering. So don't just do biometrics. Rely on what data you have inside your institution. Rely on networks of data outside of your institution. Put different types of biometric technologies in place. I mean, we are never trying to say, come card and we'll solve everything for you. We cannot. But you have to think about layering and then also doing risk-based assessments along whatever flow you're doing. Is it customer onboarding? Is it completing a transaction? Is it adding a new payee? Is it signing up for a promotion? These kind of things. If you're looking at the risk profile of that client throughout that journey, then you can apply different sort of checks along the way. And a lot of those can be completely transparent to the consumer, so that a good consumer can pretty much sail through with a minimal amount of checks if your risk-based approach has indicated that the person is low risk. But when you start to pick up ideas along the way that something looks fishy, maybe the person onboarded successfully, completed their biometric check, that all looks fine. But then a couple of weeks later, they're changing some of their credentials, this kind of thing, or trying to complete a large number of transactions. This is where you have to notch up the risk. So continue to innovate on the biometric side, but don't make that the solution, the only solution. The more things you have, the harder it is to hack.
Certainly some good points you've brought up over there. I also wanted to kind of jump back to the first point that you brought up earlier. Talk about how synthetic identity is a big risk for the industry at the moment. And I just want to get a sense of how alarming and how big of a problem is synthetic identity, particularly in Asia Pacific, to the degree that I think Mastercard also invested 850 million to acquire Ekata, who specializes in this kind of solution. So painted a picture of why Mastercard thinks this is a problem that's worth $850 million.
Okay, well, I can't quantify it exactly to the tune of $850 million. But I think it's just the cheapness of the type of credentials that you can buy on the dark web. I mean, you can buy for You can buy thousands of stolen credentials for just pennies, right? And so that combined with the ability now to rapidly generate synthetic identities and try them just means it's a huge problem. And I think, I don't know the complete rationale for paying so much for Ekata, but it's not something that the traditional fraud methodologies that are embedded within the credit card networks can solve. So we're looking at a wider variety of credentials. We're looking across payment types. We are combining sort of web-based we call it dynamic personal information, so things that can change. You always have your national ID, but your phone number, your email, your address, your IP, these things can all change. And so those are what I think Mastercard saw the value in, and we know that looking at those types of credentials can solve this problem of synthetic identity fraud, or at least help. So I think that's why they chose to bring Ekata in. It's not something that your traditional fraud tools can solve. And we know that there are so many other types of payment methods out there now. There are all kinds of new accounts being opened, new types of credit being offered. So that's why you need something new.
Certainly. Does anyone else in the panelists have any other views they'd like to share about the situation with synthetic identities, or the thinking they have around synthetic identity in their organizations? Otherwise, yes, Gabby?
Yeah. I think a related point to that is, I agree with Nick that we should not solely depend on one particular technology, such as biometrics. There's so many other things to consider now in the identity, the digital identity of a person. You have behavioral biometrics, you have device intelligence, those and a lot of other factors to put together your particular digital thumbprint, if you will. That will just increase the number of factors that are considered, not just image, video, and voice. But and that is a technology that has to be continually improving over time. So I agree also that it is continuous improvement, and that's something that we all have to support because it is an expensive technology too, but we need it. So I think that's my takeaway from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I want to kind of jump back to something that Beaver brought up earlier about how a lot of these bad actors have moved on to malwares. And I think recently in Singapore, we've seen cases of one of the banks not, I guess, disabling access to the banking app until they remove certain apps that they deem to be a little bit dangerous. And then there was a parliamentary discussion about it. And, I think the user aspect of that is quite tricky, right? To get them to follow strict hygiene factors to protect themselves. Do you have any thoughts on that, Beaver?
Definitely have, because we were the bank that started it all. I mean, to be honest, we also realized that people were concerned about privacy. I mean, I just sidetracked a little bit.
Yeah.
People were concerned about privacy and all that. And truly, the privacy aspect of it was not infringed, but the perception there was a privacy infringement when we highlighted the app that could potentially cause problem. And that really was the general feedback that we got from the public. And to be very, very clear, I mean, we were targeting apps that were downloaded from unauthorized sources with a particular setting that we know that scammers or the hackers have actually exploit. So it's a two-factor thing. So you must have both for us to disable access entering in. To be honest, I think the association at bank is really also made clear during their which I really want to thank them for coming out as well to talk about this as well. In general, most banks in Singapore we don't compensate for malware because it's really a case of cyber hygiene. But being part of the industry, we felt that the social impact of malware is actually very drastic and it's quite a big thing, because I think if you see the reports, like several cases of their CPF or Central Provident Funds money, which they save for retirement, entirely wiped out, And that's why the whole industry came together. It's a public-private thing, a collaboration. We thought through it. We think through, we have to do something for the people, for the consumer, for the customer. I mean, it's doing the right thing, in our tagline, right? Say now and beyond, right? Really, really now and beyond. It's really for long term for the customer. We decided to do this, But of course, there are lessons to be learned from the episode. Like maybe the communication could have been done better. Actually, what we're looking at, and actually, what are we not looking at? So I think that's really one of the things that we thought we could have done better. But otherwise, I'm proud to say, for OCBC, since the upgrade of the software, I don't touch wood. I don't have any malware cases reported to us, and it works. So I have people joking with me, my classmates joking with me, saying that Beaver, I use your app like a pseudo antivirus thing, Once I download it, I run it, I see anything funny, I'm going to delete it away, and then I will then delete your app, So I was joking him. I said you should just keep the app there, and then every time when you run it, just go it. But I think that's the way forward. But is it the ultimate solution? No, it's not. It's not. Hackers are too smart. Scammers and hackers are too smart. They will figure another way around it. But like I was saying about the pandemic, right? This is just probably for the Omicron variant. So we got to come out with something else along the way. But hopefully, I think customer education and people awareness is really the ultimate vaccination. Wash your hands, just like the government saying, right? Wash your hands, when to wear a mask, things like this. We have to reach the stage of endemic now. On the biometric part of things, I'm just worried that one day we'll go back to the good old days. Hardware token, everything physical. Remember? I don't know whether Vincent, you're old enough to remember. I remember having internet banking. I have to put an access card into DBS would give me a special dongle, slot an access card inside. If there is an access card, it's authenticated. They let you through. I hope we don't go back to that dark age.
No, I certainly hope not. we've moved forward. Let's not move back.
Yeah. But ultimately, that to me, and I jokingly tell some of the regulators that that's ultimately the way to kill all this malware and all these hackers, right? Because you need something in the physical world to stop something in the virtual world. Yeah.
You make this joke enough to the regulators, one day they'll be like, actually, you know what? Beaver might be right.
That's why notice I only joke about it here.
Hopefully not. So I also want to switch gear a bit and go back to Chen, who maybe can offer some perspective from the business side of things, right? And I think particularly for startups, or even sometimes if you are involved with payments and whatnot, the margin can be quite small. Sometimes if you have one or two fraud cases, that could really be a big hit on your margin. And secondly, I think for startups, your resources may not be as large as some of your counterparts on this panel, right? So I think really being able to balance the business needs, the fraud prevention can be a little bit tricky sometimes in terms of deciding how much to invest, where to invest, what to invest. So how do you guys navigate this as a business?
Yeah, very good question. I think, thanks, Vincent. Yeah, so I think that one of the aspects would be that, let's say, example, in terms of credit card payments, we basically work with a provider to do a lot of the scorings and whatnot to predict, right? So because I think right now, about 98-99% of transaction doesn't have a 3DS, and only 1-2% of it, right? So then for us to build that whole technology, definitely doesn't work. We will not be big enough and it will be way too costly, but we work with provider and we basically sort of leverage on it, although we do a lot of optimizations to build through. I think today our chargeback rate is at a decent 0.01% or 0.02%. So, and of course ours, because we are mostly, our transactions are people at the store. So I think just now, as was shared, that I think that online, offline, right? In a way, because for someone to go to restaurants and fraud or go to a retail shop, there's also CCTV in the mall. So in that way, we are sort of helped by it versus a pure online e-commerce where people do it fully at their home, where we don't have that benefit, right? Because so for us, in a way, the person while using mobile, they need to be at the physical store. So that sort of helped it through in that sense. But I think that for us is that investing where we can, but leveraging. I think is working with people that who know best, and a lot of it is that in the end is that the let's say buy now pay later we were double limit for a bit, but the 1-2 cases will basically kill it, right? In the end we decided, okay, we are not the best to do this, we don't do this, let's work with folks that who can do this better. So let's say e-wallet as well, we don't go and do it, we work with people. So I think for us a lot of it is look at where it makes sense for us to value add. And today we do work with quite a lot of big players, right? So let's say in terms of mini app, today we have DBS, we have UOB, Beaver. One day maybe OCBC will come into that, but we do have those two. We have Singtel, Dash, we do have Google Pay, we work with Touch and Go's, Alipay. So a bunch of these folks, right? So I think as we work with this partnership, it helps us to leverage as well, to scale up as well. Because for our solutions to be usable in these big players, we need to get to that standard. And hence a lot of that learning happens, right? So it's like, okay, now as we work with any of these banks, they were like, okay, to work with us you need A, B, C, D, E, and we strengthen through. So I think that's sort of ways that we actually build up as well to get there, right? I think in each of the partnership with all these top players, they will push us up to that point. So I think that's will be where we are at. But lots for us to learn. I think today in this session as well, I learned for all of you, all the experts in this.
Certainly, I'm learning a lot from all of you guys as well. And I think you're right, right? Partnership is key. And that's also something that Gabby brought up as well. He spoke about some partnerships with Mastercard. I think Gabby earlier this year, RCBC also signed a partnership with the local telco Globe, right, to to combat fraud and whatnot. Talk to us about some of these partnerships and other partnerships that you are establishing in this space to combat fraud.
Yeah, I think the natural further step we need to take is to now ring fence, if you will, proceeds of not only when a fraud happens, the proceeds, if possible, if you have cooperation among different players, you now can trace effectively. Try to catch them, maybe a bit difficult, but you have better chances if you work together. Number two. But number three, also sharing in technology. You also want to present a united front against these particular fraudsters. The more difficult it will be, it's kind of like thinning out the weak hands, right? So by presenting a united front, you discourage weaker hands, you decrease their success rate, which leaves just a stronger bad actors there. But then again, if you work together, then your defense is better, and I think that is key. And that is something that not only is applicable in the local industry, but also on a global scale, because the bad actors are cross-border players. So I think there is a lot of coordination, collaboration, not only in the private sector, but in the public domain as well. In the government to government can definitely collaborate and help the private sector. This has to be an effort of everyone. No one should be left behind in this effort. So I think that's my take on that.
It's certainly a big undertaking, right? Because you're talking about collaboration between governments, and not just between governments, but within governments as well. You have
Yes.
cross agencies that need to work with each other, which can sometimes prove to be a bit of a big challenge, but that's certainly an area that needs to be worked on. Let's and before we move on to the next question, does anyone else has any input on the subject of partnerships?
I think from what
Sure,
we are
Beaver.
seeing, yeah, from
Mm,
what we are seeing throughout the
mm,
region, I think the
mm,
public-private partnership actually be increasing. So I
mm,
think we learn from China when they have
mm,
the anti-scam center equivalent to handle the
mm,
scams in there. So
mm,
so the Singapore Police Force brought the what they learned from China and actually set up the anti-scam command, where they have the police co-locating with the police and the banks. Where they have the banks co-locating with the police, and then we do the fund tracing live when there is an incident reported. We will actually go out to the other bank right in the police station where we are all co-located and do that fund tracing and getting the funds back. Increasingly, we are seeing other countries doing the same. I mean, Hong Kong has started the ADCC, Anti-Deception Coordination Center. They are going to start putting people there. My bank has also been invited to put our staff there to do the similar things like fund tracing, blocking of account immediately, and so on. And in Malaysia, they also started it. I think the National Scam Response Center.
Scam Response Center, yes.
Yes, I thought that was a very fantastic innovation idea as well, picking up from best practices. I think importantly, the whole region and we are working together to do some form of a co-location kind of concept, which actually, to be honest, is not unique to Singapore. It's something we modify, improve. I think that's really the way to take it forward. I think in Singapore, especially the Association of Banks, together with MAS and the police and ourselves, we actually have an industry task force to fight all this thing. And now we are trying to do an ecosystem approach, pulling in telco and all that. So at the governmental front, right, in Singapore, we already started the multi-ministry industry task force to fight all this. But like you say, it's not really easy. It's not easy. It's a multidiscipline ministry kind of approach. So it's really tough. But at least we are as an industry in Singapore, we are moving there, and we are hoping that the rest of the region governments also maybe take the similar approach. But the first steps we see with the co-location of the banks in the their respective anti-scam centers and all that, I thought that was a very positive step forward by everybody.
Definitely, it's encouraging to see that kind of realization from across governments and agencies to set up this kind of one-stop shop to prevent this thing. And I think that's definitely the way forward as well. Just a quick note for the audience tuning in. You're welcome to post questions. Just feel free to type it in the comment section, and we'll try to address it as we can if there's time available. We are almost at the end of our session. Maybe I'll just direct 2 more questions to the rest of the panelists, and then we'll go to some closing thoughts. Let's talk about some of the evolution in technology, right? What are some of the latest developments? What are some of the latest advancements in technology that you've seen that can be effective in combating fraud? And maybe we can start with Nick.
Sure. So I'll maybe go back to some of the things I said earlier. I think, as I mentioned, some of the old models, more rules-based type of models, are starting to fail, and because they're just too easy for AI-fueled fraudsters to get past. So we are seeing much more companies adopting AI-based approaches to fight fraud. I think what we're now seeing that's interesting is that AI is now coming into an orchestration layer. So you are bringing together, as I mentioned, several different types of checks, whether they be biometric, whether they be internal data, external network-based data, other forms of authentication. That orchestration layer is becoming more advanced, more flexible to include different types of technologies and to understand and evolve for different scenarios. And what we are trying to do is make sure that our technologies can all feed into those type of something that you are developing yourself as an institution. Somebody like OCBC has the resources to develop their own technologies in this area, or if you're using third-party platforms and looking to knit them together. So I really see advancement there because people recognize that they need a layered approach.
Thanks for that, Nick. And Chen, you have any thoughts about the evolution? What you are, or in terms of what kind of technologies that you guys are looking at internally in Fave over the horizon?
Yeah, so I think that we're not specific, to be honest. I think that for us, we're generally looking at around. I think I think where we have today currently serves the needs. I think if we add a new business model, like let's say earlier when we did buy now pay later for a bit trial, then we will sort of need to leverage on. I think at our current business model, I think we are comfortable at our cashback rate and fraud preventions. Of course, I think that we are constantly at the radar to see and learn, right? I think so. I think a lot of it depending on the if let's say one day we're going on fully online, then that I think what we have today may not be what we need. Right? So I think that's sort of where we are. I think invest where necessary. I think that the working with different folks that I think from quite frequently there are different folks that have come in and pitch different aspects. So I think we do constantly have conversation across. I think back then when we were doing buy now pay later, we spoke with Ekata as well at that point as well. So I think that different based on scenario on what we need and you do what we need. Yeah.
Following the evolution of your business as well, for sure. Beaver, any thoughts about the developments and the tools that are out there right now?
I think I saw one question about collaboration and all that.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm not paid by SAS, but we were in the market looking for tools, and we mentioned we were looking at a variety of tools that we can help. So basically, we look at a model that we wanted to build. We wanted to build a model that does two things: the prevention component and the detection component. The prevention component, usually we have two things that are very straightforward, simple rules. You can't do a lot of AI of it because it's live payments. So that's what the bank has been doing since December. So we have a prevention component whereby simple rules, we will block, we will do a hold and review and call you up. And then you have the detection module that we leverages on AI. And the detection module that we built upon for using AI is to identify vulnerable customers. That's what we have been trying to build here in-house. As Nicholas correctly pointed out, we have quite a very strong team here that does all this AI data analytics for us as well. So we built this in-house. We built a model that allow us to identify vulnerable customer. It is still running now in forward testing. What we have done is instead of looking at older elderly folks and give them more attention to scams, we realize, and the recent statistics has proven, right? If you count anybody below 40, including the kids, teenagers, you're talking about close to 70% of the population getting involved in getting scammed is actually the younger folks. So the single factor of using 62 years old and above doesn't quite make sense, even though the impact for 62 and above is higher because naturally they have more savings, right? So we figure we build a model that doesn't look at age alone, that look at other things like transaction pattern, your education level, where you stay, the demographics of things. And we built the model to identify these pockets of vulnerable people. And then we apply a lower threshold. Everything we lower it down so that we can fire alerts for you specifically for this group of people at the lower tier and identify them. Hopefully, even one of the things that I thought about as well, but it's not live yet. Whether can we do a targeted kind of promotion material to them to tell them that hey, you better watch it. But all this I'm saying, right? It's we are running the model now, but it has not really completed testing because we need to learn more. It's supervised learning, so it's really still at the learning phase. We went live in May, but it's at the learning phase to hopefully sharpen it up, so that we can then apply it to score all the alerts that generated, and hopefully bring it even to the prevention arm. We can score it and do more work on it. I think this is really the way we are leveraging on technology to store it. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the day I have Tom Cruise. You know, I for example the screen here, right? Do all this and then do the thing down like the pre-crime unit, you know, with the Oracle shave their head, you know, lie in the water.
The Minority Report.
Yeah, but I don't think we get there so soon. Hopefully not. I don't think not within my lifetime. But
that's a larger
can,
philosophical. Yeah.
Correct.
That's a larger philosophical discussion as well. But I
Yeah.
like what you guys are doing in terms of not defining it with a very one-dimensional kind of definition of it's an older population, therefore more vulnerable. Looking at all these other data points really help you to more accurately assess the vulnerability of the demographic. So that's certainly a step in the right direction as well. Thanks for
Yep.
sharing these insights. Gabby, what are your views on the latest tools, technology developments in this space?
Well, I think a lot has been done and is being done
Hmm.
on the technical side.
Hmm.
I can't really talk about specifically what types of technologies are being employed now. We don't want to tip off whoever might be
Naturally.
looking at this video, actually. But suffice to say, we agree that the approach should still be multi-layered. But those layers have to employ the latest technologies, have to bear in mind what the developments are. Now, to Beaver's point, I think the the weakest link still in the defense chain is the user, right? So it's still social engineering. So how do we combat that? And I agree, we have to keep them informed. But yes, how that's easier said than done. Different age groups, different profiles have different attention spans. Look at different things. Communication that is effective for a more mature audience may not pique the interest of a younger audience, right? So, and they have different priorities. So remember that episode where you said you might see me doing a TikTok video just to get the attention of the kids. We're seeing that now in the Philippines. Some of the other players are doing videos that will tell you a story quickly, tell you what happened, exactly how it happened. It's kind of like gossip, finding out what happened to some other person, vicariously experiencing what it's like. Therefore, you become more aware. And I think we cannot do enough of that. We need to keep on doing that because the types of attacks are evolving. The way they will contact you is evolving. And I will not be surprised if you see videos showing people being victimized by deepfakes of Tom Cruise and probably Brad Pitt. But I think we need to keep people informed. I think that's the key. They need to be informed. They need to be aware, and we have to reach them. That is the secret sauce. We have to reach them effectively so that we can get their attention and get them informed, so that they can prepare themselves.
And I think you brought up a good point, right? Because we speak so much about consumer education, but a lot of times what we've observed, at least in the past years, is that what deems as education is an email, is a video, but it's not really contextual, right? And I think what we as an industry need to think about is the contextual messaging at a point where it matters to help to prevent them from falling victim to scams or fraud, like maybe
That's
at the
right.
point of transaction or whatever, right? I think those are some thinking that we need to really do around where and how we can be more effective with consumer
Yes.
education. So that's a
So that we don't
great
become
point you brought up.
noise, right? We don't just
Yeah.
become the background noise of everyone else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like also you pointed out earlier, those who are reading the emails are the ones that are already careful. We need to reach the other
Yes,
segment. Yeah,
that's right.
great. Yeah. So before we move on to closing thoughts, does anyone else has anything else to add to this point? Otherwise, we can move on to some closing thoughts. So we'll go back to Nick. Nick, maybe talk to us about what you see happening in the next 5 years, and if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today.
Sure. Well, I think we've had some pretty dystopian thoughts about what's going to happen in the future. But I think what we also need to keep in the back of our minds is we want to do business. And I don't want to go down to the bank branch and wait in a long queue
No.
to do things.
No. Yeah.
I will find the institution that allows me to have a seamless experience online because I'm a good consumer, right? You can trust me. I'm not a deep fake sitting here in a hotel room. So it has to be a balanced approach. And we've talked about layering. And so those layers need to continue to evolve with whichever scams are happening. And we will develop, our partners will develop, our competitors will develop solutions to combat those new types of fraud, but it still has to be employed in a way that the consumer is protected and feels some protection, but doesn't get to the point where they abandon, because ultimately we're all in the business of growing our businesses, and we need to have a nice balance that safeguards consumers but also allows them to have a very good transaction experience. Otherwise they will go to your competitor. So that's something to keep in mind. When we're having fraud conversations these days, actually more people are employing our solutions to win more business because their fraud protection is too severe, and so that's something to keep in mind, is balance the growth needs of the business with the fraud protection in an effective way.
And I think the kind of thinking needs to shift, right? Because a lot of times people think about fraud and security as a cost center, but at the end of the day, as a user, it's a feature, right? Because you are protected, and um, the other thing is that it's more frictionless, and I think that is important points that you have brought up over there. Chen, what are your closing thoughts and maybe some predictions about what you see happening in the next few years?
Yeah, I think that as all this advancement, I think is also how do you have solutions for fintechs and the smaller startups, mid-sized players? Because I think that as that could become a bigger segment, right? And I think what Nicholas brought up, like, I think for a lot of players, we wanted to be able to open for business and at the same time ensuring that this can be done in the right way. So I think the same thing, like just now I mentioned on 3DS, how do we balancing, right? And how strict we are and all those things. So I think it's be ROI centric and look through. I think evolutions, it will continue to transform. How fast can we learn, benchmark with the global best and affordable and go through?
Thanks for that, Chow. And then we'll move on to Beaver, and then back to Gabby.
Yeah, but I think it's I think like one of your comments they were saying about a paradigm shift. I think it's a complete paradigm shift for all of us in the industry. I think what we didn't expect from the industry, that the scale and magnitude, they could ramp it up so fast. So I think that's really one of the key thing, and I always think that the paradigm shift comes with the fact that COVID again. COVID brings about a lot of new things, a lot of new thought process. Payment has gone digital. People realize they can work from home, they can do everything now digitally, and that actually shift the battleground from being physically scamming somebody to a digital playfield where you can actually ramp up pretty quickly. And therefore, as a bank, as a part of the player in this industry, the way forward is really to build the ecosystem. Once you have that ecosystem defense built up, from that perspective, right, you actually can do a lot of countermeasures quite quickly when the trends evolve. So like us in OCBC, when we see anything evolving, we actually have a standing committee against fraud task force within the banking sector. We actually come about very quickly, and we even let the police know to see whether this is something that we should be worried about. And then that's how we've been working together, sharing that information across. I mean, technology is one thing. The other part is really the human factor part that we need to come together. So I think the way forward for next few years to counter any of this development, one is really building the ecosystem, building that trust with the customer, that you have to be part of us fighting against this. It's not the bank against all, the police against all. It's really all of us coming together, and that's really the only way scalable. But I don't think any organization, including a large regional player like us, can keep screwing up your staff, putting up staff after staff. After all, you do all these things, that there must be an end game, right? So what's your end game? End game is build up an ecosystem, work with industry partners like Mastercard, to really just to get involved into this awareness thing. So we that way, right, we can actually fight against any or defense against any new things that's coming up.
No, for sure. Ecosystem. A lot of good points over there.
Yeah.
Gabby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the gentleman came before me gave a very good rejoinder of the different things that companies can do and should do to keep up with the fight against fraud. I think I'd like to turn and complement that with a thought on how we view as institutions trying to protect their customers, and as customers, how do we view and secure our digital assets? So we need to look at the real world, right? How have we learned to secure our wallets, our cash, our money? We put them in safes, we secure our wallets. If we're traveling, we're on the lookout. If we're taking the bus, we're on the lookout for pickpockets. I think we need to have that similar type of consciousness with our digital assets. Analogous insights. If you have digital assets, do you all keep them in one digital wallet? Maybe you should keep them in several digital wallets, right? Or if you're trying to secure it, are you making sure that the access point to your digital assets is secure? Is your OTP or your password something easy to guess? Do you store it somewhere in your computer, on the same computer that you access your wallet on? You shouldn't, because if your device is compromised, then the access to your wallet is compromised as well. So I think that has to be a continuous process of thinking about our digital assets, how we will secure them. That is the new way of I think living in the new world that we're seeing that's emerging. The third one, I think, is also keeping ourselves informed. Remember, when you're going to travel to a place, you'd like to look at videos on what are the scams in that place so you can avoid them. So it is the same. It is the same for the digital world. What are the scams that you'll avoid? What should you be on the lookout for? I think it's a responsibility not just by the institutions, not just by government, but everyone. And we all have to work together. We all have to realize that this is our problem and this is our solution to implement. And if we work together, then we will be able to succeed. Thank you.
Certainly, vigilance and working together is definitely the key. With that, we've come to the end of our session. Hopefully, we've not painted a too dystopian of a picture for everyone. Let's work towards a more utopian future. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. Take care now. Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.